Hello, everybody. This is Steve Politi from NJ Advanced Media, and welcome back to our Rutgers podcast. We have a name for it. We can't use it yet. There are lawyers involved. I'm joined, as always, by Keith Sargent and James Cratch, and this is a special podcast, like when they have a special episode of today's show, because we want to talk about what happened over the weekend. It was one of the more significant moments in Rutgers sports history. Two wrestlers winning national championships. You know their names by now, Nick Suriano, Anthony Ashnault. And, I was thinking about this today, fellas. And, in addition to just being, a major milestone, a major accomplishment for the athletic department, it really just felt like a much needed shot in the arm for the entire fan base, for the entire staff in Rutgers athletics. They've taken so many lumps since joining the Big Ten. To have this moment to achieve something on a national stage, to have it happen dramatically, to have, the fan base really engaged about it, it really felt like it was something that was important on a lot of levels.
Yeah, I think I go back to when I was in Pittsburgh in the arena corridor with Pat Hobbs interviewing him. I said, Pat, this is not – you're not talking about a moment anymore or potential. And he goes, James, we have national champions. And I think that kind of sums it up. Right. Rutgers finally has tangible hardware. They have trophies. They have, I assume banners are going to hang on the rack. They have championships now. They have two national champions. And they've kind of have a program that has proven that the blueprint that they've talked about forever can be implemented and reach success.
Yeah,
right. They waited so long for that too, Sarge. Right? I mean, that's part of what makes it huge.
Yeah, it almost became a running joke on the beat that Kyle Flood, in 2014, 2015 would talk about the Lambert Cup. Remember that?
Almost became a running joke.
Yeah, it became a running joke.
I think it achieved running joke status. Okay, go ahead.
But then you go inside the Hale Center and you have bowl trophies that are let's be honest, they haven't won a trophy from a major bowl yet. And that's from football. Men's basketball, the other marquee sport, hasn't been to the NCAA tournament since 1991. Their only real glory was 1976. So when you're talking about like the lack of success, at least on the national stage, there really isn't any, and now they do. Now they have it.
All right, so Cratch, you were there, did a great job covering it. I just put me in the arena for a minute. Now this is what kind of fascinated me watching it from afar. You have these two wrestlers. They're going to go for the crowning achievement of their athletic lives. 45 minutes apart. The crowds set the scene for me. Were they watching each other? What was the crowd like? I mean, paint me a picture here.
I mean, the crowd is tremendous. If you've never been to the NCAA championships for wrestling, I'm not just saying this because it's better than the Super Bowl. I mean, it is the most dynamic sporting event I have ever attended. Now, I haven't done Olympics. I haven't done World Series. It's tremendous. I mean, the energy, the anticipation, especially Saturday night in the finals, it's just like a powder keg ready to explode. So they started the final round. Every year when you go into the New Jersey State tournament, there's typically, for the most part, they have a random draw. They pick a weight out of a hat or however they do it, and they start it that way. So then you start whatever weight that is, and you go up and then, back around again. They kind of engineer this for TV, so they started at heavyweight, which was Anthony Cassar from Montgomery, which was another incredible story maybe we can touch on later. But they wanted to close the night out with Bo Nickel, who's just, he's going to dominate his kid, but he's just dynamic, three-time national champ from Penn State, closing out his career. So that means that, and this has kind of been a running joke around the Rutgers program, Anthony and Nick both got to the final. Like, how is the draw going to be determined to see who had the chance to be the first? So obviously they're close in the weight class, this one weight between them. So the draw happens. They're going at 85, which means Nick's up first. And to answer your question, Steve, Anthony was kind of in a tunnel, but he's got to prepare for his match. I mean, he's up pretty soon after. Yeah. So my understanding is that Nick after he won, was in the tunnel with, I believe, Joe Pollard, maybe some of his teammates watching on TV, kind of peeking through the curtain. But my guess is that Anthony was watching, but at the same time, he's got to prepare for what he's got to do. So, yeah, it was just an incredible moment, kind of like the night was the greatest night in Rutgers wrestling history, but all jammed into an hour, basically, where, let's be honest, I mean, it's not hyperbole. The program changed forever in that hour in Pittsburgh.
And Steve, I'll say this because I'm watching on my couch, as you were, I think, right? We're both watching it, at home. And if you're talking about one moment, one single moment, is Suriano down a point in sudden victory, in overtime, down a point with 9 seconds left. They put a caution up. He needed a point, and he got the escape. And that's just sheer will, against an opponent like that, to be able to get up, tie it, send it to another overtime, and then, obviously he got the takedown and, to win it. But, that moment is really what sports is all about. That moment where he came, needing a point, needed to do one thing, against a really, really good opponent to do that. I'll be honest with you. Looking back 20 years of covering Rutgers, the only moment I can compare to, just one moment, is Jeremy Ito's field goal in 2006 against Louisville.
Wow. Yeah. That's a good one.
You're talking about one play, one moment, right. One play. I've seen a bunch of them. I've seen a lot of basketball moments, some great, women's basketball games during that, 2007 run to the Duke game stands out. Todd Frazier, at Big East tournament, hitting a home run over the Cyclone. A lot of really, really great moments, but, that moment where Suriano needed that point, what was that like, James? When, you're covering it, you're on deadline, you see that moment. What was that like moment to cover?
I mean, it was incredible because, you look at that bout, there are a lot of things that happen there that usually probably go against Rutgers. I thought they were way too late, warning Dayton Fix for stalling. John Smith, who was like, the average sports fan, like John Smith from Oklahoma State head coach, he's like the equivalent of Coach K, in basketball. I mean, he's working the officials. Nick gets banged for the stall point early on. He's got to escape or it's over. Even the takedown, Oklahoma State is going to argue for the rest of the time that Nick grabbed the headgear and the takedown should have been waved off and it should have been a penalty point. But, doesn't really matter. That's the thing. Instead of sitting around and dwelling on things that went against Rutgers, Rutgers now can say, hey, like our guy powered through all this stuff. He got the escape when he needed to, because Dayton Fix, I don't think could have ridden Nick. That was my thought in the moment. I didn't think he was capable of riding him out for that 9 seconds. But still, if you get one mat return, you're pretty much done in that situation. So, just an incredible moment. And the takedown, that was one of the big things too, is that, before they come on TV at the start of every session and in the evening at the tournament, when they're going to be on ESPN in prime time, they start riling up the crowd. They get the place loud, so when the ESPN cameras roll in, the place is going nuts. And they always announce the fan bases, are there any Iowa fans, any Oklahoma State fans, any Cornell fans? Well, they announced Rutgers fans for the first time since I've been going to the tournament. And the place got pretty loud. There was a big, big Rutgers contingent there. And I think that was a sign, even before the national titles were won, that, Rutgers is now a prominent national program. They're in the mix. They're being recognized as one of the programs that's going to travel to this tournament every year and have a big fan base and be in the top 5 in attendance. So, I think that getting national champions was great. Obviously, Rutgers doesn't really have many of them, and I think it's up for debate, how many of them they really have from the past. But the fact that Rutgers now can say that they have a program that is nationally prominent, is considered an elite program in the nation, and I don't see how that's going to change anytime soon, given the fact they're about to open this sparkling new facility. And the proof of concept of having 2 national champions is only going to make recruiting better, as well as the facility. I just think that it's, they have a serious athletic program that they can hang their hat on now going forward.
I was thinking about this, guys, and this is my wrestling knowledge. If it was still tied, if he didn't get that takedown and it was still tied, this would to spruce it up. They should have allowed each wrestler to pick a medieval weapon, like so. Suriano could go grab a halberd, and the other guy could grab a battle axe, and that would really settle it pretty quickly.
Kind of like Anchorman, where Steve Carell's character
exactly like Anchorman. That's what I was waiting for.
How'd you get a hand grenade?
That's not fair. You can't use a hand grenade. All right. Anyway, we digress a little bit. So Suriano wins dramatic fashion. Ashnault dominates. He goes and does what he's done the entire year. You wrote a great story about this today, Sarge. Is what he accomplished, the undefeated national champion, the greatest single season in Rutgers history? It's kind of a fascinating thing to debate, because there have been some good ones. And, looking through your list, I mean, what Alexi Lawless did, what Cappy Pondexter did. And, I can't, I'm not going to be the one who sleeps on what Ray Rice did. So, it's an interesting debate. Do you think it is? Would you put him number one?
I do. I did put him number one, and only because, unbeaten, and Kratz could speak to that in a little bit about just being unbeaten and, the road that he had to go through to win it. And, we're talking about Nick Suriano's, moment. It's almost like a tribute to Anthony that it was so anticlimactic. I mean, we kind of thought that he was going to win, and it was almost ho-hum in some ways. It's a tough match, but, it was almost ho-hum. He won going away. To be honest with you, and we're talking greatest seasons. I mean, not greatest career.
Right.
And, as I pointed out, Rutgers has been playing since, the 1866 range. I'm clearly leaving guys out from the late 1800s, the early 20th century for sure. Paul Robeson was a dominant figure. Homer Hazel, they named an award after him. A lot of really great performances. Rutgers baseball played in the College World Series in 1950. I could go on and on and on. The reason why I went Alexi Lawless number 2, Sue Wish number 3, they were national players of the year. In Lawless' case, he was a consensus national player of the year. To me, that trumps everything. To be a national player of the year, the best player in college that year. I'm not talking about, career after that. Carly Lloyd certainly, has had a phenomenal international career. She was a notch below. She's on the list, but she wasn't, she was Biggie's midfielder of the year, as a senior. Ironically, Glenn Crooks told me that her freshman year was even better than her senior year. We're not talking about a career. We're not talking about, how they did after Rutgers. We're talking about 1 year. And to me, Anthony Ashnault, is the best season in Rutgers history.
It's funny when you broaden it out. Now I'd be interested to see what he accomplishes now, because, when you're a 4-time All-American, if he goes on to have some Olympic success, he could be the greatest, look back on overall, the greatest athlete. Right now, it is hard for me to put him there with what, Carly and Alexa have accomplished in their professional careers beyond that. But there's, there's a chance that it could get there. That's the great thing about what he's, got ahead of him now. He's got his entire, really, the rest of his career ahead of him, Well,
to me, if you're talking greatest athlete, Paul Robeson's going to be the greatest. I don't think you're ever going to top him. Not only was a pioneer, he played, he lettered in 4 different sports. We're talking baseball, track, basketball, football. To me, you're not going to get any better than Paul Robeson, for a career.
Right.
You talk about Billy Austin, who was an All-American lacrosse player and finished 6th in the Heisman Trophy voting. You talk about those guys as the greatest athletes for a career. Certainly. Again, Anthony Ashnault, takes a backseat to no one, 4-time All-American as well. We're talking, you count on one hand and have a couple of fingers left over on the greatest all-time athletes, and Anthony's definitely on it.
There's a crash. What happens now with the wrestling program? Obviously, Nick's back for a year. Is this it's going to be hard to replicate this? You mentioned that you think that Rutgers now has a premier program. Is it built on the backs of these two guys, or is there a hope for in another couple of years, maybe after Suriano leaves, that there'll be another champion?
Well, Pope John, state champion Jojo Aragona, who's coming into the program, this coming year. He's a senior in high school. They believe that he is a guy who's going to be capable of being a national championship contender. I mean, look, I think this is the issue. I think Rutgers fans have to understand that these guys are extremely special, and just because it's worked out with Anthony and Nick doesn't mean it's going to work out with every guy. There are tons of national championship caliber wrestlers who never win a national title. I mean, it is so difficult to win this tournament. And to get back what you said, I mean, there are so many national champions who then try to become Olympic champions, and it doesn't happen for them. I mean, it's such a unforgiving, difficult sport, and it can be, frankly, quite difficult to kind of guess how a guy who's dominant on one level is going to do when he moves to the next level or the next level. So, look, obviously you got Suriano back. He's a national title contender. You have Joe Aragona coming in. I think probably best case scenario with Rutgers would be he redshirts next year, but he's a guy who can be that type of competitor down the road. But no, I think now it's about recruiting. The goal that Rutgers has always had is to be a top 10 team at nationals, which they finally have accomplished. Finished 9th this year. The next step is to be a trophy team. So for non-wrestling fans, the top 4 teams at the NCAA championships in the team score each year, they get a trophy. 1, 2, 3, 4. To get to that point, you have to be a program that sends 8 to 10 wrestlers to nationals every year, and you've got 4 or 5 of those guys who are legitimate All-American threats.
Who were the top 4 this year, Cratch? Who were the 4?
Penn
State, Ohio State. Who else?
It was right off the top of my head. I don't have the exact order. My sheet's over there, and I wasn't really paying much attention to the team score once Rutgers clinched the other night. But Penn State won. I think it was Penn State, Iowa, Ohio State, Oklahoma State. So they're not top
3 Big Ten teams was
3
the
Big
point I
Ten
wanted to
teams. So that's look, Rutgers finished 9th in the country and 6th in the Big Ten at nationals. This is a loaded conference. So
that's incredible.
No, it is. And the thing is, not only that, but they finished ahead of Nebraska by a half point. Nebraska beat them by 33 team points at the Big Ten championships. A little bit of apples and oranges, but you kind of see what two horses like this can accomplish. So I think it's gonna be that. It's gonna be getting those guys. They sent 6 this year, and I'm gonna count Nick Ravina because obviously he was banged up, but ahead of sent help. They sent 6 this year. 2 national champions. John Van Brill and Nick Ravina were all-American caliber wrestlers. Obviously, they didn't get it done. They both lost in the blood round at one point in their career. They need to get to that point where they are sending 8 to 10 every year, and they have 3 or 4 or 5 guys who are definite all-American candidates, and maybe 1 or 2 of them can make a run to the finals each year. It's going to be difficult. Right. But I think that's the next step for the program. But look, they have recruited. They've been recruiting better. I think they had some misses in the past few years, but they've, Aragona coming in, I think upper weights is going to be very important. The top Big Ten programs really have strong upper weights. That's something Rutgers has struggled with. But look, they've got the facility. They've got the 2 national champions. Anthony Ashnault is still going to be around the program. I think people have gotten a little bit carried away with the whole thing that, yes, he's going to be part of the coaching staff next year. Very, very early in that stage. They don't know what his role is going to be. So the idea some people have that Anthony's going to go hit the road and be this ace recruiter, I don't think he's anywhere near that yet. He's still going to train. He's still got to finish his degree, obviously, his master's degree. So I think that's the next step for them. It's going to come down to recruiting. I will say this, though. It's going to take a year or 2, I think, for that kind of recruiting, wave to catch. And they get more guys. They've been on some top guys nationally, haven't really reeled them in yet, exception being JoJo. I think you might see them have more success going forward. The one thing I would look for, I think they're going to be a pretty attractive place for transfers in the next year or 2. Would not shock me if they're pretty active on the transfer market this coming offseason, bring in 2 or 3 guys to plug the holes in that lineup. Especially with the fact that, hey, it worked out for Nick. Nick transferred from the best place, and obviously there's a lot that went into his decision. But he left Penn State and came to a place where people didn't think, kept on saying he wouldn't be capable of winning a national title because they wouldn't have enough, talent in the room to the iron sharpens iron thing. He did it now, so I do think you're going to see them be a place that's pretty popular with transfers. I think the recruiting is going to pick up once the sparkling new facility opens, and they can say, hey, here are our 2 national champions. Here's our facility. You're going to wrestle in front of 6,000 people every week. I mean, season tickets are going to shoot through the roof, I think, because the Big Ten championships being at Rutgers next year and just the excitement. It's going to become a place. I mean, they have an opportunity to do something really big here. And I think the next couple of years is going to be fascinating to see how that kind of happens and how that unfolds and whether they can make that next step and get to that upper echelon where they're competing for trophies.
Go ahead, Sarge.
I was going to say, I just committed, by the way. I'm verbally committing to Scott Goodale, his program.
I just want real quick.
I'm signing. I'm committing. After hearing Crash,
real quick.
Just forget Ashnault. It should be Crash out of recruiting. Get him on the road, Coach.
Very quickly. I wrote this before the tournament. And you guys would know better because you guys have been covering Rutgers much longer than I have. Is it just me, or does the whole Scott Goodale story get tremendously underplayed?
I mean, I've written it. I wrote it a lot.
I mean, they hired a high school coach.
Yeah.
After they almost cut the program, and a dozen years later, I mean, he's the king of the athletic department now.
Well, I'll say this, okay, because Bob Mulcahy gets a lot of credit. He was the AD at the time. But the backstory, and a lot of people don't know this, but Billy Yard, who was a former Giant, he's a pretty big figure down in Somerset or Hunterdon County. He helped, kind of broker the deal. And Kevin McConnell, deputy AD, under Bob Mulcahy at the time, he was the one, as Politi knows, currently this happens, with Sarah Baumgartner, the current deputy. A lot of times with the Olympic sports, it's not really the AD who's doing all the interviewing. It's the deputy, and Kevin McConnell should get a lot of credit for being the one who identified Scott Goodale and helped bring him to Rutgers.
Right. I was going to make the point that Jordan Burroughs tweeted out that if all the New Jersey champions stayed home, imagine how good Rutgers would be. And I know it's a familiar refrain, but it is amazing how many wrestlers we produce in this state. We've got a pretty good track record with that. All right. Any final thoughts? Or you want to move on to some other sports?
Football.
Let's do some football talk.
Yeah, Rutgers is a football school, I think, right? No?
All right. So, yeah. So if you're done with listening about the good news, let's talk about football. I kid. Come on. It's a joke. You've been at spring practice. How does the team look? First, that's my first question. What's what is so funny? That's a legitimate question.
We've had 2 open practices.
Yeah.
Right, and
I've seen
15 minutes of practice.
They've stretched. The stretching has been.
Do they look limber? Do they look like they're? Yeah. Do they have?
We kid, and this isn't about no, because fans don't want to hear about our complaints about practice availability and all that type of stuff. But you ask the question, so how do they look? And you could ask me this come mid-August as well. I don't know. I mean, we'll watch the Scarlet White game. There's an open practice, coming up on Saturday, but, I can't tell you how they look, and really, at the end of the day, I've covered enough spring practices to tell you that most of it's fundamentals. They're leaving out most of, the top guys anyway, so it doesn't really matter.
Right.
We've talked about Arsakowski, ad nauseum, really, he's probably going to win the job. I guess the competition really is going to begin in earnest in August. But I'd be surprised if he didn't win the job. It won't be handed to him, but certainly he'll have a leg up. Come summer. We're going to ask the question come August. How does he look then? And no one's going to know until the opener, maybe even the Boston College game the second week. You're not going to have a comfort level in whether or not Arsakowski has cleared the hurdle and kind of figured it out, and maybe the light bulb has come on for him until really a couple games into the season. So that's going to be the biggest question mark between spring football training camp and certainly going into the year.
Well, yeah, and I will say this though: that's the biggest question mark. But number two then has got to be the offensive line. Now, I mean, they needed to get a kid to plug that hole off and the one their biggest target, right? We can agree on that. The Anderson kid picked Syracuse. So, I mean, are we back at the point now where they're going to have to patch those holes in the line with people in the program? Are they going to be able to do it?
I mean, I stand by what I said when we talked our last podcast for spring practice. The offensive and defensive lines were massive issues last year. They've regressed in both areas.
Yep.
So they got 2 scholarship spots left. We're taping this on March 25th. As far as I understand, the national letter of intent deadline is April 1. So, high school kids have to sign the letter and be in the class by April 1. So we'll see how many they've got left. After that, obviously, you're going to have another wave of transfer situations come open up, after spring ball. But again, how good are those guys? I mean, if guys are deciding to transfer after they have been unable to win jobs in spring practice at their schools, that to me is a second tier, transfer market, so, we'll see, waivers. It's just, I think it's going to be difficult for them. They've got some guys that they feel have potential, but we have to see them deliver on this potential. And it's a new offensive line coach. It's a new, fundamentals, new schematics, new technique. It's going to be a learning curve. So yeah, I think not getting Anderson, a major swing and a miss for Rutgers. For a guy who says he wants to play at home, and, as Todrick wrote when he committed to Syracuse, it's a heck of a lot closer to home at Rutgers than it is up in Syracuse.
I'll say this, and we talked about kind of recruiting on the last podcast, and I think it boils down to development. Whether or not, Nick Crimmin, who's played a lot of games, whether or not he could turn into a really good, solid right guard, whether or not Kamal Seymour, who's played a lot of games, will probably have 30-something games under his belt by the time the season begins. I mean, yeah, he is, he's entrenched at right tackle. Can he develop into a solid guy? Mike Maietti, same thing. You think that he's pretty solid at center. Left guard, Vineski, whether or not he can, win that job. And then, left tackle, obviously, Raekwon O'Neal, can he be the guy? Tariq Cole, has started a lot of games. I don't think he had a great senior year. Can Raekwon O'Neal, can he be better? So really, to me, recruiting, I get it. I get a lot, but I don't know if, either, I don't know if he would have, been, the starter. I don't know if he would have beaten out Kamal Seymour. So to me, it's going to be about developing, the guys that they have right now.
I will say this. I think not getting Anderson, there's a lot more pressure on junior college transfer tackle Amari Cooper, who seemed like he was kind of dinged up the first week of spring ball. If he doesn't start, then I think the questions will be, why did Chris Ash bring him in? They really need him to be in the lineup and be a Big Ten football player now. Right.
Basketball wrap up. Let's do that really quick. A lot of buzz, a lot of excitement, and then kind of a big thud. I mean, it's hard to say anything else. The season did not end well for the hoops team. Not saying it wasn't a good season, a good step forward, but it had potential to be something better than it was when you lose those last 3 games and have another off the court issue with the player getting arrested. Not what you want.
Yeah, I think they hit the wall, and that's probably the bigger question that you have going forward. It's one thing, Mathis and Ron Harper, a couple of those guys. Harper was playing pretty well toward the end, but, a couple of these guys, a couple of the freshmen who kind of hit the wall, you can understand it. First time they've actually, had that jump of 30 games in the season. I get it. Geo Baker was a shell of himself over the last couple of games. Steve Heichel attributed it to, playing out of position, being asked to do a lot more, being the focus of the game plan every week. But it's something that they're going to have to address because, Steve Heichel likes to play depth and they were as deep as they've been. But Geo Baker played a lot of minutes and you can kind of understand that, but certainly that's going to be something that they need to address because, they were, not the same team over the final 3 games. I was in Chicago, with the Nebraska game. They really dominated most of that game until like the final 4 or 5 minutes of the game where, they just totally ran out of gas. And, that to me was kind of difficult to explain. again, I think we've talked about it going forward. The future is bright, but let's put it in perspective. 14-18. You are what your record is, and they had a goal of getting out of the basement of the Big Ten. They did that. They had another goal of going 500. They did not do that. There's some questions going forward before we anoint Steve Peichel as the guy who's going to get it done. I think he needs to do it. I think he needs to, start winning with his own players and recruiting. I think recruiting is going to be, is already picked up, but, there's going to be more expectations on Steve Peichel, in year 4 than there's ever been. Like I said, the big question is going to be whether or not they can actually, win the games that they're supposed to and really start peaking toward the end of the year, like most of the best, Big Ten teams do.
Absolutely. All right, guys. I think we covered it. Anything else? Any final thoughts?
No, real quick, kind of very under the radar, softball team, new head coach Kristen Butler. They got beat up at Northwestern over the weekend. Their first Big Ten series got swept, but they're 15-14. They only won 19 games last year. And they've got half the season basically left to go. So there's a lot of people, inside the athletic department are very, very excited about the hire they made. It's kind of no ties to New Jersey. She coached at Toledo. I hope I got that right. It was Toledo. She had some success there, and it seems like they're moving in the right direction. Softball,
the new field hockey, right? Yeah, is that what we're doing?
It could be.
I mean, Cratch. This might be his last podcast. He might be the agent to Kristen Butler and Scott Goodell at the end. Going into next week because.
Be a sound career move, Maybe you can get if you can get Ashnault too. You get all three. You've got like a really solid early stable of that's a good idea.
Was it like 7%? He's going to get 7% of Scott Goodell's future salary earnings.
Hey, look, it was good working with you, James. Good luck in your new endeavor.
I'm gonna miss you guys.
Miss you guys. By then, maybe we'll have the podcast name. All right. Thanks for listening, everybody. A huge weekend for Rutgers athletics. Kind of a slow period coming in, but we'll still be here to monitor it all and getting ready for football season. We'll be around the corner sooner than you think, I hope. Steve Politi signing off for Sarge and Cratch. Thanks for listening.